The 2000 Toyota Echo doing the water pump on it. You see the pink coolant, I believe, running down it. I got the shield off of this side. Just a bunch of 10mm bolts and a nut. With the shield there. And got 3 10mm bolts on the water pump. We'll try and loosen those up. Might have to grab the serpentine belt and create some extra tension on that and break it loose. And also straight up there, hopefully you can see it, is I believe a 14mm nut for the engine mount. My plan is to loosen up the engine mount bolts and that nut, or take them out and let the engine drop down and give me the clearance I need down here to take it out through the bottom. That's my plan, and we will all see how that works. The information on the computer system's vague. It says take the belt off, take the bolts out, and remove the water pump. So, not the best help. Now, just pulling down on this belt, I was able to apply extra tension onto the water pump pulley, and so I was able to break loose all 3 10mm bolts that hold the water pump pulley on, so they're all loose. I got that 14mm nut off of the engine mount, and I'll now be bringing the car down and taking the other ones out, and we'll see how much give we have when we lower the engine. We'll put a jack down here under the oil pan so we can control the descent. Two 14mm bolts. Now safely lower the engine slightly and work on it a little easier. Whew. Probably don't want to reach in there and do that with your hand like I just did. It's down pretty far. Okay, I've lowered the engine down. Seems to be okay. I don't see, as best as I can tell, I don't see it overstressing any of the engine mounts. Just touching the power steering pulley back there, but it seems to be okay. So, and you can see we have a lot better clearance for the water pump now. We have the 10mm bolts on the water pump loosened, so we can go ahead and loosen the belt now. We got a 12mm bolt here on the alternator. Ooh. There's a 14mm bolt below there as well. There's a good chance you can find a spot to pull on the belt and it'll just naturally pull the alternator in. Or if you have a good sized pry bar or screwdriver, you might be able to just push it forward right here. Just like that. So get the belt loose. We just showed you. Let's take that off. Try to avoid getting coolant on it because that'll maybe cause it to squeak. So let's put this, tuck it out of the way. Should be good. We got our 10mm bolts here. We're just going to take them loose and we'll pull this pulley off. And we'll be right back. Alright, and it looks like we got 2 10mm nuts and probably 3 10mm bolts. Get a little water pump out of there. On my drain pan below, and so we're going to loosen up the bolts and let the water flow into the drain pan. so it's off. Basically, I'm going to lower the car down some so the water doesn't have so far to fall. I'll lower it down, then I'll take a pry bar and pry it off. So there we have the water pump is out, just pulled it off, and now we have to scrape off that old gasket so you can put a new gasket on there. Use a razor blade or a putty knife, scraper, some kind, get that off. If you really have a poor selection of tools, and if you got lucky enough for that gasket to stay on the engine like that, I could almost suggest using a little silicone. Put some silicone on the new water pump and put it on there. It'd probably be alright, but it's really best to scrape it and put a new water pump gasket on there. So that's what we'll be doing, and then we'll put the new water pump gasket on and the water pump. So we got the area cleaned up. You see we have our new gasket on there. So there we go. New water pump's installed there. So put the nuts and bolts back in, tighten them up, and reverse procedure to install. We will jack up the engine, of course, and line up the bolts. I recommend lining up the bolts. And use your fingers to put them in first. Don't use a wrench. You can cross thread them. And then put the belt on and a pry bar or screwdriver and tighten up the belt with the alternator. Tighten up the 12mm bolt. Put some good Toyota coolant in there if it's still in there. I think it's Toyota pink in this one. They have a couple different colors. Toyota red, Toyota pink. So we have jacked the engine back up with our jack, and we have got our two 14mm bolts hand started as I recommended. And then with the alternator, because we do have the belt on already, so we got our 12mm bolt. You can usually see a good indentation, an imprint on here of where the bolt was before you took it apart. So if you're not that comfortable with tightening a belt, you can certainly try and do your best to put it back where it was, and it should be fine if you didn't have any belt squeaking or any issues like that. Or just go a pinch tighter. You should be able to somewhere safely get a pry bar in here, maybe right down there. Get a pry bar or a large screwdriver and pry it back to where it needs to go. And then tighten the 12mm bolt. So we'll tighten the 12mm bolt after we tighten the alternator up and put it in the right spot. We'll tighten up those two 14mm bolts, and we'll go below again and put on the 14mm nut. Tighten them all up and fill it with coolant. 50-50 mix. Again, this is for a 2000 1.5 liter Toyota Echo.